Yeah, so my name is Deepak. I lead product management for a startup called Inrix, which is like mobility intelligence, like transportation, building like their Gen AI and data products. So to get a brief overview of like what is Gen AI, everyone's like generative AI. There's a lot of different terms. People call it LLM, GPT. So kind of go over. Does this work? Sure doesn't. Did I not turn it on? Oh, it's going through this slide.
Oh, okay. You need the USB. Yeah, that's true. Can you do this manually?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
So go about the background and milestones, the vision and strategy, some value prop and technical considerations, some risks and ethical considerations, and then go to market and positioning. Won't go through everything that you need to do to build a product, but just specifically around Gen AI, what are some of the things that I've thought about in the last year as we've tried to build a 0 to 1 Gen AI product. Sorry. So what is generative AI? Refers to a subset of artificial intelligence models that can generate new content. So basically, it's a type of neural network that is trained on a massive data sets of text and code. This content can range from text, images, music, videos, or any kinds of like data. It's really a paradigm shift on how we approach problems, design solutions, and envision the future. What are some of the key features? Is the creativity, can create entirely new content. Learning from the data, use again, like saying vast amount of data, adaptive. It refines outputs based on like the feedback and often inform, customization. So many generative models users, you can customize it and control attributes of the content and multimodal. So like what that means is some models could generate content across modalities, which means text to video, text to audio, like what Stable Audio just did, released this week as well. Kind of going through this pretty quickly to start, like, why is it important? So I think it is, and a lot of people say like a tech leap as monumental as personal computers, the web, and mobile phones. So it's like the fourth one since the 80s. I think it's that big of a technological like leap. And then there's these other ones about like scalable content, like at scale, faster than humans in like many cases. There's like a lot of economic value and its potential for innovation. So what are some of the Gen AI milestones? So attention is all you need, which is an amazing name for a paper. Google, 2017. So LLMs have been around for a while, and I won't go too much into, are there any engineers or data scientists in the room? Okay, so that's good, so I won't make myself look like an idiot on what actually but what is transformational, probably a bad word because they actually introduced the concept of transformers. I won't get too much like into that, but it kind of kicked off everything. But basically, it is a new way to look at input and output like data and the way that the context is understanding of a full sentence or different bytes of that information. It really kicked it off, I believe, and Chris, keep me honest, that all of the original people that wrote the paper have now, the final person actually, I think just left this year, have left to start their own companies or join companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, other ones that I can't think of. Those are the two major ones. What?
They'll be back.
They'll be back. The Google person says they'll be back. Now, it doesn't mean that this hasn't been around for a while. Google has been building, because what is really doing? It's in a very simple way. It's like fill in the blank of you putting in a search term. Google started that a long time ago. So then another milestone, 2020, GPT-3. Was released by OpenAI. OpenAI, I think, started in 2018. And so they started releasing 1 and 2 around that time, but GPT-3 was a big leap forward, and where a lot of companies started using the API to create conversational API products. This only has 4 things. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's happened, but one of the big things is 2022, as you guys saw last year, the ChatGPT release, GPT-4, Bard, Bing Chat, Stable Diffusion, which is an image one. The big part of this is it really changed. I think it really changed everything when ChatGPT was released. It showed the power of Gen AI, the conversational Gen AI, text API, and it was one of the reasons why it was the fastest consumer app to 100 million monthly active users. It showed, in my opinion, why the consumer touch point is the most important thing. So the models have been around for a few years, but actually seeing what it could do kind of changed OpenAI to a consumer company, which is why they brought in a former Instagram person to lead their product effort, because they've changed to a consumer app. And then in 2023, Claude 2, which is Anthropic, Llama 2, which is Meta, and then Palm 2, which is Google, Falcon, which is UAE, open source like models. These are just models, but there's been all sorts of new companies that have started. There's basically weekly changes. I was literally looking up research this morning, which says a lot about how I do presentations, but and there's new things that have been released. This week, Salesforce released their Einstein GPT for conversational. Stable Audio came out. So every single day or week, there's changes to this industry. So what are the different levels of Gen AI? I will be honest, I stole this from Andy Jassy's earnings call, but I believe it's a good way to look at it. There's the compute, which is the compute required to train foundational models, do inference, and make predictions. These are also the chips. These are where the NVIDIA is at. Of course, Amazon loves to put this up because they feel like they can play at every single one of these levels. I thought I muted my phone, sorry. But this is the reason I put it kind of in this glacier thing is because not many companies will be at this level. There's only a few, the Googles, the Microsoft, the cloud companies that can host these Amazon, stuff like that, or who make chips. The second is the Gen AI as a service. You're starting to see this a lot more. These are customizable Gen AI models, foundational ones, to make sure the proprietary data and customer data is both private and secure. So these are cases like running your models on, I don't know if anyone has heard of or started using Amazon Bedrock. No, it's fine, but it's, Chris, I'm not exactly sure what GCP, Google Cloud calls it, but they have the same concept where they're hosting different models on there that you can use and build the next layer, which is the application layer on top of that. And the application layer is the meaningful consumer touch points. These are the ChatGPT. These are the other, how is this app, Zendesk has one, Salesforce has one. How are you going to build on top of that for your customer? So used to saying, does anyone have any questions? But I'll wait till the end. So now I'll go through kind of quickly. Well, now there's 3 screens, so it's a little easier to see than there's, but there's already hundreds of companies, maybe thousands of companies that have all these different types of things. I realize that camera I'm trying to move and you can see this, but digital commerce, data science, engineering, all of these productivity, all these different companies are built on top of the Gen AI products. On the right-hand side, I just talked to Chris about the pluses and minuses of this, but you have to think about when you're going into where you're going to build it. Are you going into a place that no one's ever used before? There's a blue ocean, red ocean. I use that. There's pluses and minuses to that kind of philosophy, that strategic framework later. But are you like, so an example, and I'll just take one, like something that has a lot is like conversational or chat bots, like support. Well, do you really want to start a company around that when there's established companies that already have that, already have those consumers that are building that sort of application? So without getting too much, that's how you kind of think about like, well, it's the old like what Steve Jobs used to say is like, to get someone to switch, you have to be 10x or 20x better. That happens a lot more when you're in a red ocean sort of like strategy or red ocean market. Ocean, oh my God. Okay, I'm done. National defense, like, so there's another one, I literally saw this today. It's not really on here, but national defense is getting real, like, there's an AI company out of the EU that just raised a Series B of 223 million, which is ridiculous, like this year for national defense. I'm sorry, this round. And so you can see on this side is the top 50 Gen AI web products by monthly visits. Of the 50 companies, what I thought was really interesting, of the 50 companies on this list, only 5 are products or acquisitions by pre-existing companies. So that'd be like the Bard, Poe, which is Quora, Quillbot, like, so there is a lot of opportunity here in that market. Character AI, which I thought was really interesting. I don't know if anyone's like used that. Actually, that became like a #1 on the App Store just recently. LLM assistants or Gen AI assistants like ChatGPT are dominant on this list, but companionship and creative tools are on the rise. And another thing out of this is customers are willing to pay for Gen AI products. So 90% of the companies on this list are already monetizing. And the average product on the list makes $21 a month for the users on monthly plans, or $252 annually. Doesn't sound like a lot, but if you get a lot of users, that's a pretty good LTV on that. However, on the flip side, the margin still isn't great. There's a reason that OpenAI just reached $1 billion in revenue, but it's not even close to profitability. It's because Gen AI is extremely expensive to run. And so you have to think about like, and that's even with Microsoft pretty much paying their Azure costs, they're still spending a ton of money because the queries are on the cents. And if you've ever like asked Chris how much it costs to run a Google query, it's like infinite percent like of that, right? And it's really hard to scale if every single query costs cents to run. And so that's why, like, even though customers are willing to pay for this, you still have to think about what the cost, and especially as you bring it to your customers. All right. Next one, Gen AI as a service. So there's a lot of these, but these are some of the main ones. These open source versus paid. So there's Llama. I kind of put like what these models are, and then what's the company. So Llama 2, Falcon, which these are all commercial models, by the way, too. By commercial use, what that means is that you can use it to build an app or anything like that. It's not private use for like research. Stable Beluga, I don't know how Stable Diffusion or Stability AI comes with these names, but Beluga, MPT, which is Mosaic, and then Midjourney. And then there's the paid, GPT-4, DALL-E, Claude 2, Anthropic, Jurassic is A121, Gemini, which I saw a rumor today that they started beta releasing that. But I don't know how true that is. They started beta releasing that to customers. Titan, Hugging Face, Cohere. Now, I didn't realize Chris would still be in the room because there was a leaked Google memo on a good breakdown between open source and paid.
There is no moat.
The moat. There is no moat. And I thought it was a fantastic like breakdown of, do these paid, like what are the differences between these two, right? Usually paid are extremely large models on the billions, close to trillions amount of parameters. So the amount of inputs that are coming into the model. So spending tons of money on super complex, tons of data, tons of parameters, you will have a better model. It'll perform better, but it doesn't iterate very well. Open source, on the other hand, iterative speed, as you guys might have noticed, is super important. So you can stack improvements and not start over on the long run. So speed is really important there. And so in a matter of weeks, you can get these smaller models. One, they can run locally, and you can get these smaller models stacked on top of each other that can iterate really quickly. So that might be better for targeted areas, targeted industries that you're looking at. So if there is a moat, it's going to be the product. It's not going to be the data. It's not going to be the tech. It's not going to be the model that you use. It's how does that model fit the use case for your customers, which is a very general product thing, I guess, to say. There are also these novel models as well, example being Microsoft just open source today, EvoDiff. Again, I don't know how they come up with these names, but so it claims it can generate high fidelity proteins, so basically for medical research. Then Moderna CEO just talked about how you could potentially use Gen AI to, he said to cure cancer, but help, that's basically to help with the stock price. But anyway, there's a lot of these types of things. Note, and I promise not saying that, I do think Gemini is coming soon from Google, will outperform all of these paid models. I'm not just saying that because you're here. Just based on like DeepMind, like who's like putting together the kind of technology that they're trying to put together and like solve. I do think Gemini, which maybe Q4 will outperform all of these. So developing a product vision, this is the same, doesn't change. Like the Gen AI, there's different considerations that you need to think about, but the overall concept of how you develop a product vision, user-centric, core capabilities, what are your market needs? Does this ladder up to your actual company vision? Really important. I think the most important thing out of here is, well, all of it's important, but define what you think your moat is and your business goal. Outside of Gen AI, what is your unique product value that you're bringing to the company, like to your customers? How can Gen AI help deepen that moat or improve your customer experience? Without it, and if you take one thing out of it, out of this is, if you don't know that or what your product value is, Gen AI will not save you. And what is your actual business goal? Is it retention? Is it adoption? What are you reducing churn? Think about those things when you're building out, like, will Gen AI actually help towards those goals? I guess the down button. So product strategy. I clearly used a template because all of these look the same. And I did try, I will say I did try to ask Claude 2 or ChatGPT to write this presentation for me, but didn't really work. So, so what is your clear value prop? Vitamin versus painkiller. I'm sure you guys probably have heard of that term, but I'll go through that a little bit more. Deepening your moat, clear success metrics, whatever that means. Metrics can be kind of a moving target. What are some of the technical things that you need to look at? The quality, the scalability, the cost. What is the user experience? How intuitive is it? How do you have feedback mechanisms? So we can feedback loops of what's working and what's not working. Importantly, what is your ethical and risk considerations? Are you transparent? Is it privacy, bias, and fairness? I'll go through all of these. So another thing is to draw an analogy of like knowing what your moat is back to the mobile area. So the most successful mobile apps were always tapping on extent demand. So already demand that was there, they just might not have realized it yet. So Instagram would have never been possible without mobile, without smartphones. But at the end of the day, it was tapping to existing desire for pictures and people to share that with them. That was the motivation. Instagram just filled that, right? And so that is, as Chris really talked about well, is strip away the like, here's what I like, what you think it would do. What are they actually trying to go? What is that main like sort of motivation, and build towards that. But if you don't know that, just saying I'm going to build a Gen AI product is not going to work. So this is, you hear this all the, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but or heard of this, but you get it all the time as you go into investors or things like that. They love talking about, is this a vitamin, a painkiller, or a narcotic? Vitamins, nice to have, improves an existing solution, willing to pay if there's budget like left over, right? Like, oh, that might be cool. Painkillers, need to have, solves unmet needs, and willing to pay to have that pain go away. There's like, as if anyone's read the book Hooked, you start to scratch an itch that you don't, and you have to scratch that itch every single day that you wake up. Narcotics, these aren't the greatest terms, I realize, but it's just what they, what it is. But narcotics, highly addictive, product use increases over time once you have it. And I need to drop this slide. But what I will say, though, is that it's okay for your product to start as a vitamin. There's a lot of products that start as a vitamin because it's tapping into a need that people don't know that they have yet, right? And they started using it. They started realizing, oh, I have this need now. Again, I'll go back to Instagram, the usage, right? Bootstrapped over Twitter's network, which is a conversation for another day. But it built that, they started like, they needed to itch that scratch to like kind of post in that community, right? So it's okay to move up that chain. You don't have to go, and I actually would recommend, if you don't like, don't necessarily try to aim for the narcotics or pain, that's a bad way to phrase that, but aim for that like right away. Because there's times where if you try to do that, you're gonna let perfect be the enemy of good. And you're gonna build something that's gonna take way too long to do. You're gonna try to get too much user research, and the market's gonna pass you by. Value prop. So always gonna think about, okay, what type of where are you at in the market? Are you startup versus public? And I'll go through some of these. There's the new AI first networks. And this is coming from a really good article called Product Led by Greylock that they wrote about, like, okay, here's what we think this is going to be. New AI first networks and marketplaces, redefining enterprise software categories, Copilot for services. When we talk about naming, by the way, Copilot is probably one of the best names in the last 15 years. It's very clear on what it's trying to do. It's not trying to replace what you're doing. It's trying to partner with you for productivity. So hats off to that. Like, people are actually, I think it's funny that other companies are trying to use that Copilot like sort of thing. But when you think of Copilot, you're most likely thinking of Microsoft or GitHub. AI first networks and marketplaces, Copilot for software categories, and enhance your current product suite. So again, this is coming from that product led. I think this is a really good illustration is what's an AI first network and marketplace example. So let's talk about first, what did Web 2.0 look like? Which was a network where you just kind of shared to your, you had to have a network and you shared to that social network. Is a dominant business model and created trillions of dollars of market cap. Facebook alone, Meta, was around 800 billion. AI challenges a lot of and TikTok is an example of how it moved to an algorithm where there's supply and demand by user generated content and the For You page, right? And then what I think, or a lot of people think, the AI only network is where it might be moving towards, which is you could do like logo design, marketplace, personalized media, where AI sits in the middle There is no human, and AI is producing all of the content. So there's two things that you could like think about in an example here, and I'll check on, oh goodness. On timing wise, is marketplaces that generate unique data for participants. So freelance logo design, like Fiverr, could be replaced by an algorithm and just a few prompts. Why potentially do you need someone to go put something on and say, hey, you need to do this? You could just have potentially Gen AI do that for you. And then marketplaces that connect two sides. So these are enterprise software categories existing. So user experience. So before, there's a complex UI to like do something. Where I think things are going, and I come from originally the business intelligence world, so like things like Tableau, Looker, stuff like that, where even Office products, where you have to know exactly what you wanted to do, right? You people that became like literally Tableau experts. I think that's potentially going away. I think that's going away where everything could be moved to, well, I just tell me, like, I want to do X and it'll do it for you. You don't have to try to know exactly what you need to do. So that user experience before AI was you had to have a very complex workflow in order and know how you're going to do that. After it, and this is kind of what you're seeing with the G Suite and with Office or Office Copilot, just chat-based. You can just do those things. And then there's the other options of no incumbent tech. And then, so this is a lot of words, which is a big no-no on any presentation. So, but this is kind of what are some of the value prop and moat like examples. So for Google, I'll skip Google. So Meta pursuing an open source strategy. Google looks like built proprietary AI models that drive standalone like products, leverage consumer facing products. Like it seems like, again, Google's moat is here's a box of text, type something in it, and a result is like returned. So Google knows, I think Google knows that and it's doubling down like on that. So it's not really search, and they started as like spoken natural language. And so is the strategy to kill these other like ChatGPT and others? No, it's to destroy their growth. Like just don't let them grow. Kind of like what Instagram did to Snapchat. So you're not trying to take that. You're just like, I'm not going to grow anywhere because I'm taking all the space around you. So Meta's open source strategy, like Microsoft's partnership with OpenAI, and translates to Bing Chat, Office, Azure. Amazon kind of talked about that, the different levels that they have. They're bringing a lot of Gen AI product descriptions. That's the actual application layer. They have chips, which are not very good right now, even though what Amazon would say, NVIDIA is still the best at that. And then they have like hosted platforms like Titan or Bedrock, where it's Gen AI as a service. Apple, which had their iPhone event, or what do they call it, Wonderlust, yesterday. They didn't really talk about Gen AI. They never do, or they haven't really, but they're talking about intuitive AI, and they really own the device layer. And so they're best positioned to benefit of a world of open source models. So, but they are developing their own like Gen AI for like their services, so for like Siri or other things like that. But what I thought was really interesting about yesterday is that they announced a new chip for their iPhone, which they are clearly designing to handle Gen AI sort of things. So they doing it with like Midjourney, and other sort of things like open source models, like text ones, like probably like Llama as well. So in my opinion, this is really why they want open source to win and Meta to win. The open secret is that that Meta and Apple are like the frenemies, right? There's no companies that have more benefited from each other than Apple and Meta. So an example was iPhone would have never really got it without Meta. Like basically people just wanted to go to the App Store and get Facebook so they could use the Blue app. And Meta pretty much bootstrapped the App Store. And so Meta wouldn't be able to grow as much as they did without people having mobile, and Apple wouldn't be able to grow the store. So that's why they would never say it out loud, but they're the best, they're the frenemies. Adobe, which they just released, again, another thing I just read, like generative fill for Adobe Firefly. They're building all of their own models internally. They own all of it. They're also trying to like models, images, and creativity. So there's no copyright infringement because they're saying they own like that, so people can like use that, which is very interesting sort of like strategy there. And then those are main companies, the big five, but then there's other ones, like new ones like Superpowered. So it's an AI-powered, has anyone used Superpowered here? No, okay. I haven't either until I like read up on it. It's an AI-powered meeting notes, which transcribes meetings and puts out action items. Before it used to do things like this, but you had to do a lot of that yourself. Now they're using Gen AI to like do that for you, and it made the product 5 times better, and they can charge significantly more. Tome, which is kind of a presentation. Has anyone used Tome? Just me, I guess. Sorry. Tome is builds like PowerPoint type of things, but they do the entire workflow. You just have to put data in, and it'll build out kind of a presentation like kind of for you. They were very like, Gen AI can help us with this. So what are some of the technical considerations that you need to look at? So there's model choice and architecture, computing power, robust and reliability, and training data. So in the 3 is model evaluation and type. So you have to assess the accuracy, coherence, and creativity of these data sets. What is the model size and efficiency? Which ones make sense for your use case? There's some that transformers excel at language tasks, which others are ideal for generating images. What are you trying to do? Model size and efficiency. Larger models, like we talked about with open source versus paid, larger models require more compute, but can achieve better performance. There's scalability, response times, latency, computational efficiency. And so there, like I had mentioned, computing power, significant computational resources. There's cost associated with training, inference, and storing these models. So are you gonna do a cloud versus on-premise kind of solution? Like what makes sense? These are expensive to run. Training data. So training generative models can be resource intensive. Are you gonna do model training? Are you gonna do prompt engineering? For the sake of time, I won't go into the difference between those two, but people can ask me after. But prompt engineering at the end of the day is you're very carefully crafting a prompt. And it's so finding the right way to ask the model a question to get the desired result. It's easier to implement, and allows a lot of customization, but has super limited scope. Data quality. Data's only, and we'll talk about this when it gets to risk. A lot of the time that data is only good as that coming out that you like are putting in. How are you making sure that it's diverse and representative and it's not biased? And then robust and reliability. Like, does it produce a consistent result? Like if you put the same question in 5 times, are you going to get relatively the same 5 responses? How much does that deviate? What's the error handling? Can you actually explain what this model is trying to do? The answer is probably no, but you can try. And then there's all sorts of other things like integration and APIs, testing and validation, deployment and infrastructure, maintenance and updates, security and privacy. How can you make sure? There's a reason why most major companies have banned ChatGPT and Claude from like using it, because the data is not secure. And that's why it's like if you're gonna have to do these like ChatGPT can be a product manager's best friend. It's like, okay, just write these requirements for me. I haven't done that, but you could do that, and it'll probably write a pretty good like one to summarize like doc. But then again, if you're putting proprietary data in there, well, it's not public. It can easily be breached. Well, not easily, but it can be breached. User experience. So 4 kind of main, well, there's a lot. I just put 4 to make it simple, but intuitiveness. Is the design simple and easy to, these are kind of the same with anything, right? When you're building a product, a B2C product, is it simple, easy to use? Are there helpful tooltips? Do they actually know how to use it? How technical are these users? This is when you're building out like a customer profile. It's like, how technical are your users? Do they actually know what they're doing here? Or do you have to build out tooltips to be like, here's what you need to do to get the best thing out of it? Is there clear onboarding on how to do this? Solving a problem. Clear problem that's being solved. Is there use case guidance? Do you have good documentation if they have questions about this? Or here's how to best use this product. Are you personalizing that AI experience? Or is it a generic one that you're kind of building? Next is the feedback loops, which is extremely important. How do users report issues, give suggestions, error handling, rate the relevance? Like, is this actually meeting? Is it a simple thumbs up or thumbs down? Are you getting qualitative sort of comments like back, which are sentiment analysis, well, kind of pointless, but they feel good to the user? Are you doing customer interviews? Are you doing privacy? Can they opt in or opt out of like using that service? Control and customization. So do you have tools that allow them to guide the output? Ensure they have an indication of processing time. And like, how long is this going to take? Is it like instantaneous? And that goes back to the technical like ones. We have a super complex model that has a lot of like inputs and you're trying to do something complicated. That response time back to the user will be longer. Is that okay for what you're trying to like do? Maybe depending on what your actual product is, sometimes it's not. Ensure that users have accessibility, right? There's a lot of accessibility. Can they actually use this? Are you accessible? What happens if they have any sort of accessibility issues? Can they do you have a text to speech, right, kind of option? How will they use this if there's any accessibility issues? Can they kind of explore the model as well? So, God, these colors are awful. Sorry. They looked better on my laptop than they do on like 6 different screens. So the risk and ethical considerations. What I like to do, and there's probably a lot of feedback on whether that is like the concept of a pre-mortem. I think in Suresh Doshi, there's an Harvard Business Review article about it, which I think is fantastic. Suresh has a really good like Medium article about like how to do pre-mortems. I've started implementing them in when I build a product. I think they're extremely helpful. It's basically, as the thing, it's kind of a thought experiment you do at the beginning of during the discovery process of this product launched. The product launched 6 months ago and it's an absolute failure. Why do you think that's the case? And what it does is start addressing those risks as early as possible. You have a diverse amount of people in the room, right? Different groups. You have engineering, you have design, you have sales, depending on what your organization looks like. And so you try to address those. And I think and then you have mitigation. Then you try to rank, well, how important do we think that this risk would be to that failure? And then the ones that are higher to that list, you start having a mitigation plan to it. Not to go on my diatribe about pre-mortems, but I do think that they are extremely useful. What are some of the like risks here? Hallucination. Is people familiar with what hallucination means with it? But basically, it's a fabricated or imagined details that generative AI models do. One of the big things about generative AI models is that it will produce an output and it has zero idea if that's right or wrong, but it's just trying to predict what is the most likely next character or action that would be happening. It doesn't know if that's right or wrong until there's user input. So you could have a lot of hallucinations. So you could have inaccurate information. bad user experience because reduce how useful this is. It's difficult to really correct. So you have to have really robust like testing processes and good training data. So another one that's really come up lately is intellectual property. So in copyright infringement, author just sued OpenAI. There's a lot of things of saying that like, well, everything that comes out of generative AI models are derivative of something else. And so is everything a copyright. That's super extreme, but those are out there. So AI can inadvertently create content without credit or passing it off as an original. There's ownership uncertainty, right? Who actually owns this if you're producing it out? There's legal liability. So and I'll go through this because I'm getting close to the 5 minutes that is left. Bias and fairness. So are you modeling social bias? Often inadvertently, they can amplify problematic social biases. There's limited data diversity that is out there. There's exclusion of marginalized groups, spreading misinformation, and unethical outcomes. Environmental concerns, I threw this in there because there's an article this week that Microsoft's water usage is up 34% this year, which is kind of unreal because these Gen AI models require a lot of computing power, which means a lot of energy, which means a lot of water. So it's something that definitely, if everything starts moving to Gen AI, the water usage is going up. There's a huge environmental concern there. Legal, let's go through this. Regulatory, big tech there was a meeting in Congress this week about it. Musk doing Musk things, said that like the world's gonna end and we need like these things, but there's gonna be regulation. The EU's already like done it. What's gonna happen is that's what's gonna be interesting. And then there's harmful content that can happen. I will go to market and positioning. These are just the simple ones, right? Like what is your situation? What is your ideal customer profile? Where are you launching? What's your growth strategy? How are you going to market, name, and monetize this? What are your unit economics? Are you identifying and addressing those risks early? So, and this is ideal customer. Who are the decision role? What are their pain points? What's their adoption rate? How technical savvy are they? What's their customer workflow? Because as you guys have probably noticed, when you're building out products, what you think the customer workflow is very rarely what the customer actually does. So always knowing and doing interviews and realizing what do you think, or one thing that I found really useful is give them a task, but don't be there for it. Kind of record the session and see what they do. See how that matches up to what you think your assumptions of what this workflow is going to look like, because I guarantee you it's going to be different. Marketing and monetization, what's the competitive landscape? What's the marketing strategy? What kind of monetization? Was it going to be a pay per use? Is it going to be subscription? What is your actual TAM, SAM, and SOM of this? Of your product? Does Gen AI actually increase your TAM or your obtainable market? Very rarely is it going to increase your TAM unless you had that value prop completely wrong to begin with. How do you do continuous testing? How do you continue model testing, user feedback, iteration, beta tests, and pilots? And then continuous learning and adaptation. So do research, user needs, innovation. One of the things that I found is weekly, with the different product team, with the product team, I pick an industry and say, how do we think Gen AI is going to change this industry? What it gets is creative juices flowing outside of what we currently do and keeps that innovation up. And then the market intelligence. I read 40 newsletters a day kind of thing just to realize what is happening in the industry. How is that changing? How does that change our strategy? In conclusion, you guys can read this because I can open it up for any questions. Oh, well, thank you, by the way.
All right. For product managers
So great question. I think that product managers, this could be a huge advantage for product managers, increase like productivity, right? To make tasks like simpler that they weren't like, but took up a lot of time. So again, I really like Shreya Stosey's like concept of L&O framework, which is leverage tasks, neutral tasks, and overhead tasks. I think Gen AI can help a lot with the neutral and overhead tasks that you just have to do on like a weekly or daily basis that you can potentially help automate. And I think if people like don't like realize that's what a lot of other product managers are like doing to kind of leverage to really focus on the high impact tasks, you're probably going to get left behind like on that. So I don't think Gen AI is going to replace product management. I think it's going to make the product managers that use Gen AI are going to be that much better if they focus it on the things that they should be focusing it
on. Sure. Yeah, so I think to each company their own with their objectives and missions, but I wanted to kind of dig into what you said of how expensive it is running sense in the queries. So let's say even an enterprise as big as McDonald's, you'd want to be first mover advantage in implementing this kind of technology, but what's the business justification currently if you were to go talk to like a CIO or a board of directors for why it makes sense to implement this technology now and potentially eat those costs with seeing the benefit later?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would say that you kind of have to know how much value this is actually going to bring, right? Like, why is this going to bring this X amount of value to your customers that you weren't able going to see before? And then what is your monetization plan, right? So are you going to do a cost plus like kind of thing to kind of cover like those like kind of costs? I think could be important too. But it's really justifying as like, here's what we think our moat is, right? And here's how Gen AI can really deepen that moat and improve that customer experience. And even though that cost might be high, we think that it'll be a 5x like kind of return on that investment because of these reasons. And so unless you have that, like Gen AI, if you don't have that, don't know like what that is, you'll never be able to sell it. And nor should you kind of try to sell that in, or, oh, we should just do Gen AI because everyone's doing Gen AI. There's a lot of risks associated to it. There's a lot of costs associated to it. So unless you know how is this going to improve my customer experience, so we're gonna have more adoption. They're gonna have less churn. And this will be beneficial because they'll be able to do X things and their time to value is gonna be that much better. That's how you can like justify it. If you can't really articulate that, then there's no reason to try to do a Gen AI, like build Gen AI into your products.
All right, we have time for one more. And who is? Yeah, all right. Coming over.
Very simple question. I think I could just say it. I will use the mic. You said you're a product manager in your company, right? So how do you give me an example of Gen AIs do you use for your daily product tasks?
For daily product tasks?
Yeah.
So that's a great question. I use it to summarize notes, right? Summarize meetings and send out like notes after, because as much as I hate doing it, people want to see people that can't go to the meetings want to see those after action. Like what were the decisions made? What was the thing? Another thing that I like use it for is to summarize articles or briefs or things like that to send around. So if I'm doing competitive research and it's a 10-page article, I can put that article into Claude or ChatGPT and tell it summarize the 5 points of this, and then I'll send that along, and it gets right to, here are the things that you should really think that are important out of that. And so it really helps with like competitive like intelligence to know like what is like happening. And then I help write better user stories, right? So have it kind of do different prompts, right? To kind of prime it, right? And as you're doing this and say, here's what the current user story is, how would you, if you are, this is the scenario, this is who you are. If you were trying to do X and you're trying to accomplish Y, right? Because a lot of the times I'm not writing the user stories. And since there's no engineers in here, I'll say the engineers are writing the user stories. And no one can understand what you're trying to actually, like what the value is out of that. So they can help, like it saves me a lot of time on things that I had to rewrite, like stories. I had to rewrite user stories. I had to rewrite requirements, all of that. And these are closer to, as I would say, like the leverage or overhead tasks that I can do that takes me 10% of the time that it was, so I could focus in on like the leverage tasks of the strategy of the prioritization. Something I didn't even talk about was like prioritization, right? Like how do you prioritize like when you're building out like the features? Because I really want to focus on like, well, what should your strategy be? What are the ethical and technical considerations? But those are some of the things that I personally use outside of just trying to build the product.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.